I didn't know my life was about to fracture the moment I sat across from my boyfriend at a candlelit table, holding a glass of wine I never asked for, waiting for him to decide whether I was still worth choosing. That night was supposed to be special. I had planned it carefully, down to the restaurant, the timing, the suit I wore, the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, we could reconnect. For 3 years, I had been the woman who showed up without hesitation, the woman who drove to the airport at 2 in the morning when his flight was delayed, the woman who listened for hours while he vented about toxic coworkers, office politics, and dreams that never quite materialized. I believed that was love. What I didn't realize was that somewhere along the way, my steadiness had stopped being appreciated and started being judged. Across from me that evening sat a man I barely recognized. His eyes weren't on me. They kept drifting, to his phone, to the room, to somewhere else entirely. And when he finally spoke, his voice was calm. Too calm. He told me he needed to be honest. He told me there was someone else, not a stranger, not a new temptation, an ex. A woman from his past named Michelle, a name I had heard countless times over the years, always followed by contempt, regret, and stories of betrayal. A woman who had cheated on him, used him, disappeared without explanation. And yet, somehow, here we were. My boyfriend looked at me and told me he was confused, that Michelle had changed, that she was exciting now, risky, unpredictable, alive. And then he asked me to do something I will never forget. He asked me to give him a reason, one reason why he should stay with me instead of going back to his ex. In that moment, everything slowed down. The clink of silverware, the hum of conversation around us, the candlelight flickering between two people who were no longer equal. I realized I wasn't his partner anymore. I was an option, a placeholder. And that realization, quiet, sharp, and irreversible, was the beginning of the end. I'm Linda Karishma, and I used to think my biggest strength was how steady I was. I'm the kind of woman who remembers small details without trying. How someone takes their coffee, the exact phrasing they use when they're stressed, the way their shoulders tense before they even admit they're upset. I work full-time in a role that rewards precision and patience, and my life has always been built around structure, schedules, plans, follow-through. So when I met Logan, the man who became my boyfriend, I didn't fall for him because he was dramatic. I fell for him because he felt like a project I could finally build into something real. His name was Logan. Logan had this charm that didn't come from confidence so much as from need. He wasn't loud, he wasn't arrogant. He was the kind of man who could sit next to you and make you feel like you were the only stable thing in his universe. He had stories, office politics, toxic coworkers, a boss who always undervalued him, friends who never really showed up the way he did for them. He would tell me these things with this exhausted half smile, like he was trying to be brave about it, and I would listen. I always listened. We met through mutual friends at a small get-together, nothing glamorous, someone's apartment, cheap wine, too much laughter echoing off walls that needed repainting. Logan and I ended up on the balcony at some point, the city air cold enough to sharpen your senses. He asked me questions that felt strangely personal for someone I had just met, what I wanted, what I valued, what kind of life I was building. When I answered, he didn't interrupt. He watched me like he was memorizing me. A week later, he asked me out. It started out easy, the kind of love you can slide into without noticing. We went on dates that felt simple but meaningful. Late-night diners, weekend walks, little bookstores where he pretended he didn't care about the poetry section, but somehow lingered there the longest. He'd reach for my hand when crossing a street like he was afraid I'd vanish between one sidewalk and the next. And I let myself believe that if I held on tightly enough, we'd become something unbreakable. For the first year, I didn't mind being the one who carried the stability. I was the one with the reliable schedule, the one who planned ahead, the one who kept our weekends from dissolving into, we'll figure it out. I didn't see it as imbalance. I saw it as love in motion. When Logan's flight got delayed once and he called me at 2 a.m., voice tight and irritated, I didn't even hesitate. I drove to the airport without complaint. He slid into the passenger seat, smelling like stale coffee and frustration, and when he rested his head back against the headrest, his eyes softened in relief. "You're the only person I can count on," he said. Those words should have felt like a compliment. At the time, they did, when he had long nights complaining about his job, about coworkers who undermined him, office politics, a manager who praised him publicly then sabotaged him privately. I sat with him on our couch and listened. I didn't scroll through my phone. I didn't him while thinking about something else. I gave him my full attention. Sometimes I'd offer solutions. Sometimes I'd just let him talk until the anger drained out of him and left only exhaustion. He would lean into me afterward like he was borrowing my calm, and I thought that's what a healthy partnership looked like. Over time, Logan moved in. Slowly, naturally, an extra toothbrush at first, then a hoodie left in my closet, then an entire drawer of his clothes. Eventually, the apartment stopped feeling like mine and started feeling like ours. A spotless, modern 2-bedroom unit in a safe neighborhood. Clean lines, neutral colors, quiet streets. The kind of place people chose when they were building a future. Marriage, kids, stability. At least, that's what I thought. For a long time, Logan seemed grateful. He'd tell people I grounded him, that I made him feel safe, that I was good for him. Safe. That word used to mean love to me. Then, somewhere around the 3-year mark, something shifted. It wasn't sudden at first. It was subtle, like a temperature change you don't notice until you look up and realize you've been shivering for hours. Logan started getting restless. Not outwardly. He still smiled, still kissed me goodbye, still posted the occasional photo of us that made other people comment things like couple goals. But when we were alone, something in him felt irritated, like my calm was no longer soothing, like my steadiness was no longer a comfort. It was a constraint. The first time I really felt it was in the way he began describing our life. He didn't say it was bad. He said it was beige. He started using that word like a weapon, dressed up as a joke. "This place is nice," he'd say, looking around our apartment like he was evaluating a hotel room. "It's just beige." Beige. Safe. Predictable. Boring. At first, I laughed it off. I told myself it was stress. Maybe he felt stuck at work. Maybe he needed a change. Maybe he was just going through something. I wanted to be compassionate. I wanted to be mature. I wanted to believe that love meant riding out the rough patches without panicking. But looking back now, I see how the cracks formed in plain sight. Because the distance that grew between us didn't come from work. It didn't come from stress. It came from a name. A name Logan claimed he hated for years, spoken with disdain, regret, even anger. A name he started mentioning differently, softly, almost carefully. Michelle. For years, Michelle had existed in our relationship only as a cautionary tale. Whenever Logan talked about her, it was with a tight jaw and a dismissive laugh. Stories of immaturity, emotional chaos, broken promises. Michelle was the ex who cheated, the ex who borrowed money and never paid it back, the ex who ended things with a text and vanished to find herself, backpacking across Europe with no plan and no responsibility. Logan used to say Michelle was a phase he regretted, a mistake he learned from. So when that name resurfaced, it shouldn't have mattered, but it did. The first shift happened quietly, almost invisibly. One evening, we were sitting on the couch, our legs touching, the TV playing something neither of us was really watching. Logan was scrolling through Instagram, thumb moving lazily, when he mentioned, far too casually, that Michelle had moved back to the city. "Oh," he said, not even looking up. "Apparently Michelle's back." I remember nodding, eyes still on the screen. I asked something neutral, something supportive. "Really? After all this time?" "Yeah," Logan replied. "She started her own marketing and branding agency. Looks like she's doing pretty well." There was a pause after that. Not long, just long enough to feel intentional. I didn't think much of it then. I should have. That moment, my easy dismissal, was my first real mistake. Because after that, Michelle stopped being a punchline. She became a comparison. About a week later, Logan brought her up again, this time with details. We were watching a documentary when Logan suddenly turned the volume down and said, "Michelle just bought a loft downtown." I glanced over, mildly surprised. "Oh?" Logan nodded, suddenly animated. "Yeah, it's gorgeous. Exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, tons of natural light. Very industrial. A lot of character." He kept talking about the layout, the neighborhood, the aesthetic. He spoke with a kind of enthusiasm I hadn't heard directed at us in a long time. Then came the afterthought. "Not like this place," he added, gesturing vaguely around our apartment. "This is just safe." That word again, safe. I looked around with new eyes. Clean counters, neutral furniture, a quiet street outside. A home we'd built together over 3 years. A place chosen for stability, not spectacle. "What's wrong with it?" I asked gently. Logan sighed, a dramatic, practiced sound. "Nothing's wrong with it. It's just beige. It's what everyone expects. Predictable." That single word became his favorite way to describe our life. Beige dinners, beige routines, beige future. And slowly, I realized something unsettling. Michelle wasn't just a person from Logan's past. She had become an idea, the embodiment of everything Logan suddenly claimed to want: risk, excitement, unpredictability, the opposite of me. Then came the behaviors. The phone never left his hand anymore. Messages answered quickly, then hidden just as fast. Screens angled away, notifications silenced. When I asked casually who he was texting, he always had an answer ready. Work stuff, my assistant, a vendor issue. One Tuesday evening, his phone vibrated on the couch beside him. He grabbed it instantly, turned the screen away, typed a response, and flipped it face down on his thigh. I asked, calmly, deliberately, who it was. "Jennifer," he said, without looking at me. "Work emergency." Jennifer had quit nearly a month earlier. Everyone knew that. I didn't argue, I didn't accuse, I didn't raise my voice. But something cold settled in my chest, the certainty that I was no longer his partner. I was his safety net, the fallback option, while he explored something else. And that's when I decided I needed clarity, not confrontation, not drama. One final test. I made the reservation the same night I decided I needed the truth. Not a conversation, not a confrontation. The truth. I booked Laurent, an upscale French bistro Logan had been casually hinting about for months. The kind of place people save for engagements, anniversaries, promotions that actually meant something. It was expensive enough to feel intentional, serious enough to signal effort. I wanted to see if effort still mattered to him. Friday arrived quietly. I wore the charcoal suit Logan used to say made me look dangerously put together. The words echoed in my head as I adjusted my jacket in the mirror. He stepped out of the bedroom in a black dress that hugged him perfectly, elegant and striking, but something about his energy felt off, restless, distracted. Like his body was present, but his mind had already left. From the moment we locked the apartment door, he was checking his phone. Once in the elevator, again in the lobby, twice in the car. He didn't ask how my week had been, didn't comment on the reservation, didn't smile when I mentioned how long it took to get a table there. At Laurent, the atmosphere was everything it was supposed to be. Dim lighting, soft jazz, candles flickering across white tablecloths, romantic, intimate, a place built for connection. Logan ordered the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu without asking me. I noticed. He drained the first glass quickly, eyes scanning the room like he was looking for an exit or an audience. By the time our appetizers arrived, the silence between us felt heavy enough to press against my ribs. I broke it. "You seem distracted," I said softly. "Is everything okay?" He set his fork down, took a slow breath. For a second, I thought he might apologize. I thought he might say he was stressed or overwhelmed, or that something had been weighing on him. Instead, he looked at me with unsettling calm. "I need to be honest with you," he said. My body went still. "I've been talking to Michelle." I stopped mid-bite and placed my fork and knife carefully on the edge of my plate. I didn't speak. I didn't react. I waited. That silence unsettled him. He had expected emotion, anger, jealousy, something he could use, so he kept talking. Michelle had reached out weeks ago. She had apologized for everything. She had changed. She was successful now, magnetic, full of energy, alive. Logan kept saying my name while he spoke, watching my face for cracks. "She wants us to try again," he said. "Start fresh." He paused deliberately, took another sip of wine. I asked one question. "Why are you telling me this here?" Logan leaned forward, elbows on the table. This was the moment he'd rehearsed. "I'm confused," he said, though nothing about him looked confused. He looked empowered, in control. "I care about you. You're amazing. You're reliable. You're safe." Safe. But Michelle is risk, excitement. She makes me feel alive. Then he crossed his arms and said the words that ended everything. "She wants me back. I have to choose. But I owe you a chance to convince me." "Convince him." "Give me one reason," Logan said calmly, "why I should stay with you instead of going back to her." The room didn't spin. It didn't explode. Something inside me simply locked into place. Quiet. Final. For a moment, I genuinely couldn't breathe. Not because I was panicking, but because the sheer audacity of what he had just asked me took the air out of my lungs. He sat there across from me, candlelight reflecting off the rim of his wine glass, waiting, watching, expecting something. An outburst, a plea, proof that I still wanted him badly enough to fight. I didn't give him that. I placed my hands flat on the table and felt the cool surface beneath my palms. My heart wasn't racing. It wasn't breaking in some dramatic way. It was steady, calm, almost eerily so. That scared him. "You want a reason?" I asked quietly. He smirked, just slightly, confident, certain he was in control. "Yes," he said, "one good reason." I looked at him then. Really looked at the entitlement in his eyes, at the way he leaned back in his chair like a judge waiting for a defendant to plead their case, at how naturally he had reduced 3 years of shared life into a competition I hadn't agreed to enter. I realized something in that moment. He didn't love me. He loved the position I filled, the stability, the safety, the convenience of knowing I would still be there while he explored something shinier. I signaled to the waiter. Logan frowned. "What are you doing?" "Can we have the check, please?" I said calmly. Confusion flickered across his face. "We haven't even ordered mains." The waiter returned with the bill. I opened it slowly, methodically. $140 total. $80 of it, his wine. I took out my wallet, counted carefully, and placed $70 on the table. Exactly half. Then I stood. "What is this?" Logan demanded, voice rising just enough for nearby tables to notice. I looked down at him, suddenly aware of how small he seemed sitting there. "You asked me for a reason to stay," I said clearly. "So I asked myself something more important." He scoffed. "And? Why should I stay with you?" His mouth opened. Nothing came out. I continued, my voice steady. "I offer loyalty, respect, and consistency. You offer comparisons, secret messages, and ultimatums." His face flushed. "You can't just leave me here." "I paid my share," I replied. "You wanted independence. This is what it looks like." I suggested politely that he call Michelle. Maybe she'd cover the rest of the bill. Logan stood abruptly. "If you walk out that door, we're done." I didn't turn back. The cool night air outside felt like freedom. The silence from Logan lasted exactly 20 minutes. I noticed because I checked the time. Not out of anxiety, but curiosity. I was already back in my apartment, the familiar quiet wrapping around me like something solid. I set my keys down, took off my jacket, and stood there for a moment, listening. No phone vibrating, no dramatic voicemail, no apology. Just silence. Then my phone lit up. Not a call. Texts. One after another. 8:43 p.m. Are you serious right now? 8:44 p.m. You're actually psychotic. Everyone is staring at me. 8:46 p.m. You need to come back. My card declined. I don't get paid until Friday. What you did is financial abuse. I stared at the screen. Financial abuse. The word felt almost impressive in its audacity, coming from a man who had just tried to auction off his loyalty while drinking an $80 bottle of wine he couldn't afford. I didn't reply. I didn't block him either. I took screenshots. Then I went to the recycling room, grabbed a sturdy cardboard box, and started packing. It was almost shocking how little of Logan's life actually fit into my apartment. 3 years together, and what did it amount to? Clothes I'd paid to have dry cleaned. Skincare products I'd bought because he kept forgetting. A few framed photos where he looked perfect and I was slightly out of focus, like an afterthought. I placed everything neatly in the box and set it outside my front door. I took a photo and sent it with one message. Your things are outside. Do not ring the doorbell. His response came instantly. I hate you. You're insecure, jealous, and boring. Michelle's picking me up. She treats me like royalty. Enjoy your sad, lonely life. I activated Do Not Disturb, poured myself a drink, and slept better than I had in months. The next morning, the smear campaign began. I woke up to missed calls and a long message from Amanda, Logan's closest friend. She accused me of screaming at him in the restaurant, throwing money at him, abandoning him over a harmless conversation. I didn't argue. I sent facts, screenshots, clear timelines, one calm explanation. The response never came. By the end of the day, the doubt had spread. And once doubt enters a story, lies don't survive very long. Meanwhile, Logan went public. Instagram posts, vague captions, staged photos with coffee cups, and nightlife videos. Michelle's tattooed hand appeared just often enough to feel intentional. He wanted a reaction. I gave him none. And 5 days later, the truth surfaced. Not from Logan. From Derek, a friend of Michelle's. You should know, he wrote. Logan thinks they're exclusive. Michelle told everyone she's just a placeholder until her real boyfriend gets back from London. Placeholder. The word tasted different when applied to him. The crash didn't come immediately. It came slowly, like the delayed echo after an explosion, when the noise has already passed, but the damage hasn't finished settling. For 5 days after Derek's message, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't even feel relieved. I felt hollow. Not because I missed Logan, but because I finally understood how close I had come to building a life on a lie. At night, the apartment felt different. Quieter, yes, but also heavier. The absence wasn't of him. It was of the version of myself who had believed love meant endurance, who had mistaken patience for intimacy, who had stayed calm while being quietly disrespected. I replayed moments I had ignored. The sighs, the comparisons, the way my steadiness had slowly been reframed as a flaw. I didn't cry dramatically. I didn't collapse. I sat with it. And that was worse. Then, at 11:42 p.m., my phone lit up. Logan. Linda? 3 minutes later. Are you awake? Then, it's an emergency. I didn't respond. At 12:05 a.m., the truth finally slipped through. She kicked me out. She said I was nothing. My parents are out of town. I have nowhere to go. Please, I just need somewhere to sleep tonight. I stared at the screen, pulse steady. A tenant who had violated the lease. Vacated voluntarily, now requesting re-entry. Request denied. I powered off my phone and went to bed. At exactly 7 a.m., the pounding started. Not knocking. Pounding. I was already awake, coffee brewing, appreciating the silence of a space that no longer smelled like his perfume or vibrated with anxiety. I checked the peephole. Logan stood there, soaked, mascara streaked, wearing clothes that weren't his, Michelle's. He looked like consequences personified. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. He tried to move in automatically, like muscle memory. He hit my shoulder and stopped. "Please," he whispered. "I'm freezing. You can't come in," I said calmly. His face twisted. "What?" He launched into explanations. Michelle was cruel, laughing, said horrible things, called him a warm-up. I believed every word. "I was stupid," Logan cried. "You were right. You were always right." He reached for my hand. I stepped back. "You didn't break something," I said quietly. "You fired me." He tried guilt, rage, tears. "You're supposed to be the nice one." "I was," I said. "And you told me that wasn't enough." When I closed the door, the deadbolt clicked with finality. And for the first time since the restaurant, I cried. Not for him, but for the woman who almost married him. I didn't feel powerful right away. That morning, after I closed the door on Logan, I leaned my forehead against the cool wood and just stood there, breathing. My hands were steady. My chest hurt, but not in the way heartbreak hurts. It hurt in the way clarity does. Because in that moment, something finally shifted. Not in him, but in me. For 3 years, I had believed that love meant absorbing chaos without flinching. That if I stayed calm enough, loyal enough, accommodating enough, everything would eventually stabilize. But standing there, listening to his footsteps fade toward the elevator, I understood something with absolute certainty. I had never been his partner. I had been his shelter. And shelters are only valued when storms arrive. I made myself coffee, sat at the kitchen table, let the morning light stretch across the floor exactly the way it always had. Nothing in the room had changed, except me. My phone buzzed later that afternoon. Not Logan. Amanda. Her message was short. "I need to apologize." She said she had seen the screenshots, that Logan had finally admitted he'd asked me to compete with Michelle, that he'd ordered wine he couldn't pay for, that he'd lied repeatedly. "I didn't want to believe it," she wrote, "but it's clear now." I didn't feel vindicated. I felt done. Then came the quiet confirmations. Mutual friends stopped checking in on Logan. His social media posts slowed, then disappeared. Michelle's name vanished from his captions entirely. The chaos he chased had burned him faster than I ever could have. That evening, I packed away the last reminder of him, a single photo frame I'd missed the first time. I didn't tear it up. I didn't throw it across the room. I placed it face down in a drawer. I wasn't angry. I was finished. For the first time in years, my future felt like my own again. Not beige, peaceful. And I realized something else, something that felt almost dangerous in its simplicity. I wasn't afraid to be alone. I had been afraid to be unchosen. There's a difference. The consequences didn't arrive with a dramatic crash. They arrived quietly, one relationship at a time. Logan didn't lose everything overnight. That would have been too easy, too cinematic. Instead, what he lost was far more damaging. Credibility. People stopped inviting him out. Group chats went silent. When his name came up, it was followed by pauses, those careful gaps where people reconsider how much trust they had once given freely. Amanda told me later that he tried to rewrite the story again. Softer this time, less accusatory. He said he had been confused, that he was under pressure, that I had been emotionally distant. But the difference now was evidence. Receipts don't argue. Screenshots don't exaggerate. And once people saw the pattern, the comparisons, the entitlement, the way he framed loyalty as something to be negotiated, they couldn't unsee it. Even his family backed away. Not dramatically, not publicly. They just stopped defending him. His mother, who had once praised me for being such a stabilizing influence, stopped returning his calls as quickly. His sister stopped liking his posts. His father told him bluntly that you don't get to treat a partner like an audition. Logan moved back into a small temporary apartment across town. The loft downtown, the symbol he had admired so openly, was never his. It had always been Michelle's. And Michelle? She moved on exactly the way people like her always do. Quickly, casually, without consequence. Logan was left alone, not because anyone punished him, but because no one trusted him anymore. As for me, I didn't celebrate. I didn't post anything cryptic. I didn't tell my side of the story beyond the people who asked directly. I focused on my life. Work became quieter, more productive. My savings grew. My sleep deepened. My body relaxed in ways it hadn't in years. One afternoon, months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop downtown, laptop open, enjoying the kind of peace you only notice once chaos is gone. And then I saw him. Logan walked past the window, trailing behind another man who was shouting into his phone, completely ignoring him. Logan carried 2 heavy shopping bags, eyes downcast, expression tired. It wasn't Michelle, just another version of her. Another project, another risk, another storm he thought he could fix. Our eyes met briefly. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I simply looked away and continued typing. And that quiet indifference was the final consequence. 6 months later, my life no longer felt like something I was holding together with careful hands. It felt settled, not in the way Logan used to sneer at, safe, beige, predictable, but in a way that finally belonged to me. My mornings were quiet. My evenings were mine. My apartment felt lighter without the constant undercurrent of tension, without the subtle pressure of having to prove my worth to someone who had already decided I was replaceable. My savings account had grown, my skin had cleared, my sleep came easily. And somewhere along the way, I stopped replaying the restaurant scene in my head, not because it didn't matter anymore, but because it had already taught me everything I needed to know. I did start dating again, slowly, carefully, not because I needed validation, but because I wanted connection without conditions. I met Richard, an architect, over coffee one afternoon. He liked my boring habits, thought my financial planning was attractive. He never compared me to anyone else, never tested me, never asked me to audition for a place in his life. With him, love didn't feel like performance. It felt mutual. One day, months later, I saw Logan again through the window of a cafe. He looked better than he had that morning on my doorstep. Clean clothes, styled hair, but exhausted. He walked behind a man shouting into his phone, carrying bags, waiting for attention that never came. Our eyes met. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I didn't hurt. I looked down and kept typing. Because the story was never really about him. It was about the moment I realized something essential. When someone asks you to give them a reason to stay, they've already left. I didn't give Logan a reason, but he gave me a gift. He showed me exactly who he was before I made the permanent mistake of marrying him. And that quiet, uncomfortable, undeniable truth saved my life. I took a sip of my coffee. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.